Not anything.
Thank you, Teresa. We are now live streaming on YouTube, so it's our official continuation of our afternoon meeting of the House Appropriations Committee. And on the agenda today, this afternoon at 3:30 is Mike O'Grady from Legislative Council, and we have Nolan Langwell from the Joint Fiscal Office. And we are going to continue discussion on our bill regarding stimulus equality. The bill proposes to establish a Corona Relief Assistance Program for immigrants. And so that is what we are going to talk about. Mike, do you want to, are you behind the screen there? And
Yep.
no, you want to join us? I don't know if you were listening to the floor, but has called you and filled you in on some of the discussions on the floor about the federal provisions and our provisions, especially around 17-year-olds and college students. And
Sure.
you could talk to us so that we really understood what and why the federal government did it the way they did.
Okay. So I sent Teresa a document earlier. It is the economic stimulus payment language from the CARES Act. And I think this will be helpful for you to look at in understanding why the language is the way that it is.
Okay, I will tee it up if you just give me a minute. Oh. Well, sometimes my mouse just decides it's going to not work.
Do you want Mike to?
No, I got it. It just takes a minute to get it to behave. Okay, here we go.
And Nolan, while that's going on, were you able to provide, you'll be able to provide some ranges for fiscal implications, I hope, after Mike is done?
Yeah, I can talk about it some.
Okay, so we'll continue with Mike and then move to Nolan.
Okay. So what you have in front of you is the stimulus payment, the $1,200 to eligible individuals and $500 for the qualifying children. And you'll see that payment right there where you can see a little bit of highlighted language on 1,200. But going right underneath that subdivision, you'll see an amount equal to the product of $500 multiplied by the number of qualifying children within the meaning of Section 24C of the taxpayer. So 24C is referencing 26 USC Section 24, which is the child tax credit. And what they're saying is that a qualifying child underneath that is the qualifying child for the $500 payment. And when you go to 26 VSA Section 24, a qualifying child is defined as someone under the age of 17. So that is why it's under 17 under the feds, because they just cross-referenced the child tax credit. Maybe they knew that they were doing that on purpose, maybe not. But in so doing, they link themselves to the definition of child that's under 17. So that's why the feds did that. You didn't want to do that. You didn't like that disconnect between the 17-year-old and the 18-year-old adult. So you went to under 18, which is different from the feds because they use that definition of qualifying child under the child tax credit. But it addresses some of the criticism of the CARES Act. There is significant criticism of that missing year effectively for children who did not receive or were eligible for the benefit. So does that answer the question about the 17 years of age versus 18 years of age?
It does for me of how they got it, not saying whether I believe it's right or not, but now I understand why it was 17 by the provision that they used. Chip, do you have a question?
Yeah, just a little more clarity. So the under 17 was for an eligible child, so that a parent could claim a child that was under 17 and therefore get the $500 additional payment. Were there situations in which a 17-year-old was a 17-year-old able to claim for themselves the tax credit? Sorry, not the tax credit. Sorry, the stimulus payment. So, you know, if they were emancipated, or I can't think of any other situation, but were 17-year-olds out entirely, or was there any way in which they could claim a credit?
I don't believe that they could claim a credit, as opposed to the dependents. There is a way for dependents to claim the credit if they don't qualify as a dependent. So a dependent is someone who's 18 years of age or older, who relies on a benefactor for more than 50% of their, well, actually, a dependent is anyone that a taxpayer claims for more than 50% of their expenses and that person earns less than $4,200 in a taxable income in a year. So that dependent who is, say, 18 years old and does not rely on the adult for more than 50% of their expenses and earns more than $4,000 in a year, they qualified for the $1,200 payment. But anyone that met that definition of dependent up to 24 years old did not qualify for the federal payment.
Okay, let me just say it back to see if I've got it. So if you were claimed as a dependent.
Yep.
Well, no, I haven't got it because.
So if you were claimed as a dependent, you are ineligible. And going up on the screen, you'll see the definition of eligible individual.
Okay. So
and it says the term eligible individual means any individual other than an individual with respect to whom a deduction under Section 151 is allowable to another taxpayer for a taxable year. And when you go to 26 USC Section 151, under that section is the dependent deduction. So anyone that was claimed as a dependent is ineligible for the federal CARES Act income impact payment. Do you understand so if you were a dependent,
I think so, but the 17-year-old issue,
you have a gap. There's
right.
there's a year for 17-year-olds as qualifying, just as a qualifying child, right? If they are not a qualifying child, they do not get the payment.
So if I'm an adult with dependents, I can claim them in order to get the stimulus $500 payment unless they're 17. If they're 17, then I can't get the $500 payment for them. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay.
And so, Mike, we've heard from a couple of parents who said they have 17-year-old children and received the $500. Was it based on a time, like it was based on taxes of a previous year? So was the age based on a previous year as well? 17-year-olds did receive the 500.
So there's documentation out there that 17-year-olds were receiving it, but erroneously. And so I've read about that. There has just been some erroneous payment of the 17-year-olds. There is an effort federally to backfill for the 17-year-olds and to either make them eligible for any other future economic assistance. But generally, when you go to the Treasury guidance and the documents that are interpreting it, and just from the plain language of this, 17-year-olds are not supposed to receive a payment as a qualifying child.
So when you say erroneously, do you mean that it's false information or it was a mistake that they got it? Because I'm hearing it from some reputable, like people I would believe. Their kids are 17, they got the check.
The document I reviewed about it came from one of the Midwest Department of Taxes, and they were talking about how there had been a significant number of false payments by IRS. It wasn't due to any fraud or
Okay.
error by the applicant. It was just by the IRS. The IRS wasn't disqualifying the children that were listed. So it wasn't the taxpayers' fraud. It was the IRS's failure.
And that was hit or miss if you got it or not.
Yep.
Thank you. Marty?
I just wanted to clarify back this question about the child and whatever. It sounds to me as under the federal program, any dependent who was over 17 would not qualify for the $500 child payment because they weren't a child under that definition. So is that correct, Mike?
Correct. They're not a qualifying child.
If I had a college student, right, but if I had a college student child who's still my dependent, but they're 19 years old, they still would not I would not qualify to collect the $500 child payment.
Right. You would not get the $500 child, and they would not qualify for the $1,200 payment themselves.
Right.
They're emancipated.
Okay.
If they are not a dependent, meaning that they get more than 50% of what they need to support themselves from themselves, and they make more than $4,200, then they qualified for the $1,200. They are not a dependent. They
Right.
did not qualify for the dependent exemption. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes. Yep, I do.
Yes, yes, I understand that.
Okay, are there other questions for Mike? Mary?
So we were trying to rectify what we thought was a fallacy of the 17 to 18-year-old gap. But in fact, there is a larger group of people who have been prevented from receiving a benefit in one way or another. That larger group being people over the age of 17 up to 24 who are technically dependents. They are not eligible for their parents are not eligible for that funding.
Sure, I'll give you a real life example, and it's interesting because it goes both ways. My sister has twins. The girl, fraternal twins, the girl graduated when she was 22. The boy graduated when he was 23. The girl was not claimed as a dependent on last year's tax return by my sister and her husband. The boy was. The girl got the $1,200 payment. The boy did not. They were both under 24. One was a dependent, one was not. Neither of them qualified as a qualifying child because they were over 17 years old.
So we waded in attempting to take care of one segment of a problem, not realizing, I believe, that there was a larger issue out there.
Well, I think you have closed the gap for the purposes of what you were looking for equity, economic stimulus payment equity for those persons who were disqualified based on immigration status, right?
Yeah.
And so whether or not they were a non-resident alien. And so there was a gap for parents under the CARES Act between 17 and 18, and you close that. So, but anyone who's an eligible adult from 18 on still qualifies. You did not address the dependent issue for the purposes of your payment because those people, the eligible applicants probably aren't filing that deduction. You don't really have that issue for a large majority of those that are going to apply.
But people for whom immigration is not a question, who have 17-year-olds, could not receive the funding. People
That
who,
is
correct?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
People whose immigration status is questionable may receive the funding under our amendment.
That is correct.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we only addressed half the
Half the problem.
half the problem, probably less than half is
Less, yeah.
more. Or we created an inequity within another group. You can look at it that way, that we created another inequity by supporting one group of 17-year-olds, but not addressing another. Chip, your hand was up.
I mean, Mary just sort of covered the ground that I was going to cover. So yeah, I mean, I think the issue is that in a sense we have created, or at least the members thought that we have created an inequity in providing the potential payments to folks who have 17-year-old children who are not in this program when they are not eligible to receive a payment in the CARES Act program.
And Chip, I think that we will hear on the floor about 17-year-olds parents did receive the $500. And we want to go back to Mike's explanation that went out. It wasn't supposed to go out that way.
I mean, I can send you the Treasury document that says that it's available $500 per child under 17 years of age. So as I said, I've read some accounts of people getting paid for their 17-year-olds when they probably shouldn't have.
Probably
Yes.
a spouse that had died. Some of those went through too that shouldn't have. Mary?
Mike about, oh, sorry.
Oops, did you, before we leave, Mary's hand is down. Go ahead, Chip.
I just wonder if we could ask Mike about whether there's any, there was discussion on the floor about whether being in college, enrolled in college, had any effect on your eligibility for this, for the CARES Act program. And I don't hear any reference to that in what you talked to us about. Is there anything about that in?
Not that I'm aware of, other than many children that are enrolled in college are claimed as dependents. It's beneficial for them because they get to carry forward on their parents' health insurance if their parents have health insurance. And they also get some income tax benefits and what they have to pay in tax liabilities. So it's not that they're enrolled in college, it's that they're a dependent.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, are there any instances or were there any other exclusions where you may have a dependent that is over the age of 24 that was excluded? Are there any instances where that could have happened?
Over the age of 24,
Yeah.
I think that the primary one is the non-resident alien. And then estates or trust are also excluded. So, so you're not getting a payment if you're filing your income as an estate or trust.
If I have a child who, can I have a dependent child over 24?
I don't believe you can unless there's a SSI designation, I believe, for
Okay,
them.
disabilities?
Yep.
And would they have received it or not if they were 29 and?
That's a great question. I'm going to have to go back and look at that reference to 26 USC section 151, which is all the deductions. I didn't look under, I haven't looked for that at all. So I can't really speak to that.
I'm just thinking that there's even a larger pool of people who were excluded that may be included if the guidance changes as it comes to light. As you said, the 17-year-old issue, you have heard that that's a possibility of change in Washington, and maybe it's even a larger group of people.
Well, the push is not, it's to close the 17-year-old loophole, but it's also to give the benefit for dependents. I'm sure many of you know that your college-age children are living at home and sucking your bank accounts dry here and there. And so that is effectively an argument that's being made at the federal level.
I'm just curious, though, about if we'll look into children with disabilities that are still dependent. If they
Sure, I need to look into that. I haven't looked at that at all.
Chip?
So to that point, in that piece that Mike had up earlier, there is something about dependence of any age. So a parent who is dependent on their child and is claimed by their child on their tax forms is not eligible to receive the $1,200. I don't know whether they are eligible to be claimed. Oh, no, they would not fall within the eligible child definition either. So I would think that that's a group of people who are not eligible for any payment. It's the broader question. I don't think it answers your particular question, Madam Chair, but there's another group of people who are ineligible.
So Mike always has 100 irons in the fire. So if we have no other questions, I think we can let him go. Are there any final questions for Mike on this? And then Nolan, you were looking at the 17-year-old issue only, not the larger pool of those beyond 17 that are 18 to 24, and then possibly those other dependents that Mike is looking into. What do you have for some rough estimates for us if we were to do a total, inclusive bill, or to consider one?
I only, for the record, Nolan Langwell, the Joint Fiscal Office, I was only looking at the 17-year-olds, but to give you a sense of that, there are, in the 2018 census, there was about 7,300 17-year-olds. If you multiplied 7,300 by 500, you're looking at 3.6 million. Now, it's hard to know, as you've said, or we've heard, some parents got that, so we have to back them out. And then the way that this program is modeled is that the checks wouldn't just go out, you'd have to apply for it. So we'd have the whole take-up issue again. So it depends on whether you would have the tax department just send families checks for 17, who have 17-year-olds on a certain date, or whether they have to apply for it. If you have to apply for it, I don't know that you get 100% take-up. So, but you'd be looking at, anywhere between 3 and 3.5 million, depending on how the program is rolled out, just for 17-year-olds. Now, if you rolled that out to up to age 24, you're talking millions and millions of dollars.
So I have a question for either you or for Mike. Let's just say we have the millions and millions of dollars and we did do this, or at least, you know, that 3.6 million. If the federal government then did change its guidance, how would you, because we did not do it under a federal bill, could we recapture those dollars if the guidance changes and the money goes out to the same group of people, or would they just receive a double benefit?
I think it depends. I think it depends on how you draft it. You know, one way to recoup it might be through when they file for their Vermont taxes. You might be able to recoup it that way. But again, do you have any other thoughts on that?
Mike, did you have any thoughts on that? I'm just curious if it would just end up being a double benefit.
So could you summarize that again?
Sure. If let's just say we were able to, you know, identify, you know, the $3 to $3.5 million to do just the 17-year-olds. If the federal government then changed its guidance in October, and these payments have already gone out, and then the federal government says, okay, we didn't mean to exclude these groups of people, and they send out the $500 payment, is it just then a double benefit? Because I don't think we can recoup it through the federal dollars.
I think it would depend on a couple of things. If it was going to be a direct federal payment, you have that issue of double payment. And then you have what Nolan just referenced, and maybe you could recoup it in some tax filing. If it's going to pass through the state, like the 1.25 billion did, then you could put conditions on it and provide that anyone that received a state payment was not eligible for the federal payment. Or you could use an offset. You could probably offset some of that state money with the federal money. So I think it really depends on how the money comes into the state. If it's going to be a direct payment to the taxpayer, I think you have that issue of double payment. If it's coming in through the state, I think you could probably manage it in a way that you wouldn't have double payment, or you're offsetting the state funds that were used.
Depending on the guidance, the rules
Yeah,
that money comes. So it's we can't answer it basically because we don't know how the money will go out and what the rules will be around the money. Diane?
Thanks. So Nolan, 3,300 17-year-olds in the state?
7,300.
7,300.
7,300. And that's
Cool.
that's a lot. Well, and at $500, right?
Yep.
Thank you.
That's the 2018 census.
Okay, are there other questions? I think we can let Nolan and Mike go if there's no other questions. I know they're busy. We are going to have an amendment, it looks like, come to the committee tomorrow from the member from Northfield. It's indicated that it would be to remove the 17-year-old provision from our bill to make it equitable, or, you know, to make it match up to the federal bill. We can discuss that tomorrow when we know exactly what the amendment looks like, because until it's before us, I don't want to say that's what the amendment is, but I'm just curious what committee members are thinking about the situation we're finding ourselves in at this time.
So, I mean, I think it's a good point that we need to react to the amendment that's in front of us, but as a general statement, I think it's crystal clear that we don't have funding to expand this, and we were clear in our discussions earlier that we wanted to make sure that there was funding to sort of fully meet the payments that could potentially go out to the to the group that we're trying to serve. And to me, that means that either, I mean, we can stick with our present plan and have that discussion on the floor about why our plan or our program should serve those 17-year-olds who did not get served by the CARES Act program, or we can decide that our intent to stay as close to the CARES Act program as we did up to this point, should guide us towards the unfortunate decision to follow the program even where it doesn't make a lot of sense, and that is to exclude 17-year-olds. And I guess that's sort of, that's where I'm kind of, without more information and more discussion, that's kind of where I'm leaning at the moment, but I'll look forward to the committee discussion about that.
Thank you, Chip. I have Marty, Linda, and Diane, which hand up? I clicked it down. Was your hand up or down?
It was up, but I can wait my turn.
Okay, so Marty, Linda, back to Diane.
My preference would be for us to modify our bill, if indeed that's what the amendment coming through does, so that we mirror our program closer to the federal. I know we were trying to do a good deed, but I think in light of this, we're favoring some 17-year-olds, but of course, not a whole bunch of others. And I think we would be better off just to make our program as close to the federal program as it is.
Thank you, Marty. Linda?
I agree with Marty. I think that once we start deviating from the federal program, that's what caused all this to start up, I think. And so if we keep with the federal program, which was under 17, we're going to hear from it from both ways. But for me, I would prefer to go with the federal program.
Linda, back to Diane and then Mary.
Is it me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So here's how I'm thinking, that we could get balled up in the fact that the feds sound like they're potentially going to try to see if they could rectify something that they may or may not have thought had happened in support of people that were outside of it. So if we changed our bill to make the federal bill, and the feds now then go ahead and change it and provide, do we have to go back and do the same? I'm not feeling that it's all that far out of line to leave our bill alone and see if the feds catch up to us, so to speak. And it sounds like a lot of 17-year-olds, like people not knowing the guidelines, there may not be as many that did not receive. So I'm hoping that the feds will come through and see the error of that and provide for the group that's outside, and that we stick with where we're at right now, and we don't need to make a whole lot of changes.
Hey,
Does that make sense? Sorry.
Mary and Linda, thank you, Diane.
This is a good example of no good deed going unpunished. I'm as much as I want, and I really honored our initiative to address this narrow group of people. It's become clear to us subsequently that it is not just a narrow group, and in fact, it's a much larger group. And we also do not know what the feds may do, and we may end up reimbursing people who are going to subsequently be reimbursed. So my notion would be to back off, to go back to the, to more closely align with the feds, knowing that at any time in the future, when we're in session, we can, if the feds only partially take care of the problem, do not address the folks whose immigration status puts them in jeopardy, we can take that step to fill that hole when we better understand what the hole is in the future. So by if we back off, more closely align with the feds now, that doesn't mean we can't take care of the problem in the future.
Thank you, Mary. I have Maida and then back to Linda.
Okay, thank you. Diane, bless you. I have no faith whatsoever that the feds would see the error of their ways and step up to the plate, as it were. That said, and following up on what Mary just said, there's absolutely no way under the sun that we can afford 7,300 times 500 to cover all 17-year-olds in the state, in addition to the 17-year-olds that we have hoped to cover in our bill. Because their community has been so left out and left behind so far. I painfully believe that, as Mary put it, we should back off, quote unquote, and in my mind, not let our effort at something more perfect be the enemy of something that's darn good in terms of our bill. And I don't want to see our bill get just destroyed by this one component. It's not just one component, it's a huge component. It's people's lives. But that's period.
Thank you, Maida. Linda?
I just wanted to respond to Diane in that basically the same thing that Maida said. I thought that the feds will come up and replace that 1 year of age and fund those children. And so to me, as Marnie said, I said, and Mary said, we should drop it down to the 17, under 17, and like the feds did, and go from there.
Thank you, Linda. Back to Diane.
I think maybe I'm back. I didn't want to change our bill to include the other 17-year-olds. We can't afford it. And that was where I was thinking, they may have a chance, another chance at something, which is where I was going. Like, I don't want to change our bill to include a new cohort. Does that make sense? If we have to by majority, I don't know how many 17-year-olds are out there that the way the bill would have originally addressed it before we changed it is going to eliminate them. I don't believe that there's a large number, but I could be wrong every day. So that was where I was going at. I didn't want to change our bill to include more.
Okay, so tomorrow we're going to have an amendment brought before us. I believe it's being prepared now. Is there a desire on the committee's part to do an amendment prior to receiving the amendment from another House member? So we would just wait. I would like to, so if the amendment is coming forth as I think it's desired, but until I get it, I don't know that it would align the 17-year-old issue with the federal government and not make 17-year-olds eligible in the bill we have before us. We have inequities with 17-year-olds. We have inequities maybe with parents with children that are dependents with disabilities that we will find out about. And we have the inequities with the college kids or kids who are still a dependent and not in college up to 24 years of age. There seems to be many issues. I just from hearing around the table, the costs, Nolan, you said would be in the millions and millions if we corrected all the population through 24 and perhaps then, and those parents that have dependent children over 24 for special, for reasons. We don't have those dollars before us now. I would like to take kind of a straw poll. If you're thinking you would like to, at this point, align with what the federal government has done in the past, hoping they correct some of their actions in the future, which is not part of the straw poll, but align our bill with the federal bill and take away the 17-year-old provision. This is simply a straw vote, just so I know the work we need to do. How many of you are leaning toward supporting that kind of action?
Reluctantly.
Okay. And I don't see Bob. Okay, so I think that that's the way the committee is leaning, unless we learn something tomorrow. It looked like it was a unanimous at this point to not going to fix the federal government's bill in our bill, but we would provide the provisions as they have provided, except for this one population. Marty, was your hand up? Nope, you took it down, it was up, I'm not sure.
I was voting with the blue hand, but you didn't want to.
Okay.
The blue hand.
So if there's no other questions for Nolan or Mike, we'll look for Representative Donahue's amendment for tomorrow. And I think that I think there's a lot of regret and a lot of heartache here, but I think it's clear the direction the committee feels it needs to go so that we don't lose an entire bill. Any final thoughts for Nolan or Mike or for any committee members? I think that wraps up our day. We will meet tomorrow. Our calendar is that we will meet. We were going to meet at 8:30 to go over the OPR bill, but we have already done that. And we do not have anything on the agenda past that. We have the caucus of the whole at 2 o'clock. And I will go over the larger overview and the CRF money, and then you guys will be all on call for the, to answer questions for your parts of the budget. Chip, you have a...
Yeah, can we hear, if we're not doing the OPR at 8:30, can we hear the amendment then, so we have time to discuss? Yeah. I can't remember what time the floor is, but...
The floor is at 3, we're on at 2, the floor is at 3. Oh. And if we could hear the amendment at 8:30 or 9, that would be good. And then we would have the rest of the morning to get ready for the caucus of the whole and for our floor, where we'll be on Thursday on the floor at 2 o'clock.
Right.
Follow Representative Donahue to see if we can come in at 8:30. Teresa, okay, and Marty?
Would it be possible that our summary sheet will be available by tomorrow morning, or is that a later project?
Where is Maria? Maria, do we have a finalized, I've been doing some edits. Do we have a finalized summary sheet, the highlight sheet of the budget? Is that ready to go?
Yes, we do. And I believe that it's been posted on our website. I just need to check.
What about the CRF funding? Is that?
Oh, Bill, you go look at it.
Okay. I'm sorry, Steve. I'm doing two.
I'm sorry, Maria, if you're doing two. I'm sorry. Teresa, could you pull up the summary sheet and if we can find it on the site, and we'll just look it over in the committee?
You want it now?
Yeah, and I'd like to.
Okay.
And I'd like to see the CRF sheet. I haven't seen a completed CRF sheet yet. So that we see what we did in the bill, but what we've done with the full 1.25 billion.
So I sent everybody the web report, which is posted. Spending restatement, that's the no, there's So the summary is not up yet. I don't see that.
Do you have it, Maria, that you could send to Teresa so we can just view it quickly?
And Kitty, where would the document be posted? The
On the
JFO,
the
website.
JFO site?
JFO under the appropriations,
Okay, thanks.
2020.
Yeah, and I will, so I sent you the web report and I'll put all this stuff in your OneDrive and I'll also put it on the committee page.
Okay, and you'll send the highlight sheet as soon as it's ready, the one. where
Yeah,
you-
I will. I just, I think Maria's just really busy and
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm focusing now. What is it that,
The
what
highlight,
is it?
the highlight sheet hasn't been.
Did you
posted.
see the highlight sheet on the website or no?
no.
No.
No, okay,
No.
I'm gonna send it to you. I'm gonna send it to you. Okay,
So, Maria,
Um,
I have a question for you. My
yes.
question Is the CRF sheet, is that one complete that outlines how the full 1.25 is rolled out?
That's what, we were gonna meet with, Stephanie on that after she got through with Senate appropriations, so,
We'll have it for tomorrow at 2.
yeah, I'll send it to you even tonight. I just, I need to talk to Stephanie before I send it out to anybody, because, that's what we need to do.
All right.
Sounds insane, I know.
So my
Um,
question to the committee, do you want to look at the highlight sheet as a committee now, or are you fine just looking at the pieces?
I'm sending it to Teresa right this second. Okay,
Want it up on the screen to discuss as a committee?
Makes no difference.
Waiting.
It always helps me make sure I got it right.
okay, I just have to spell her name
Kitty?
correctly. Here it is.
Kitty,
Yes.
do we still need Michael Grady?
No,
or
I
is he-
told them they could go,
Oh, okay.
but I don't see Mike here. Oh, you're
He
still, there.
is there.
Yep.
He's gone.
No, I told them they could go, that we moved
I think
on.
it's just
Okay,
work.
Teresa, did you get it?
Yeah, I just got it.
Okay, good, perfect.
Let me just get it, tee it up here. Okay.
It's a pretty nice day out.
Yeah. 72, I think, beautiful.
Oh, over this way, it's quite gloomy.
Live over on this side of the state.
Ooh.
So it needs the bill number put in, and so you can see it's still kind of in its edit form, but the first couple of paragraphs just talk about the unstable conditions that we're seeing, not only in Vermont, but we know this is across the country. And then we talk about some strategic investments in the Coronavirus Relief Fund. And then if you go down, Teresa, these were some of the key spending areas that I worked with Maria for highlighting. I thought the state colleges was important. The micro business and IDAs is the second bullet. The third has been going around for a long time, and that's, the having a parallel structure for mental health care within the healthcare services. Community High School of Vermont seems to be a perennial issue that keeps coming back. The grant writer, we talked a lot about in moving it to VHCB, that our fund retirement OPEB obligations for the year are covered. The CUDs, those are important to many of our communities, and I showed the total here, the split. And then the next piece, Marty, are these numbers correct? I thought it was 250 and it's for a total of 700,000, Maria, if you can fix that, it's not 750. Is that correct, Marty? It should be a 700,000.
No, it's 750.
Oh,
It was 500 plus 250.
Okay.
So it's
Okay.
750.
Oh, okay, but the total amount they want is 800. I knew it was all zeros.
Okay,
Senate,
all right.
They wanted 8.
right, and the Senate can make that adjustment if they feel necessary. But that is the House position, and then the downtown tax credit for the total of 3 million. Then the warning siren, that's what we're going to use, Peter, instead of for the dam. And Forest Parks and Recreation, the additional money we put there. Outright Vermont, we heard from a few committees and many legislators on Outright Vermont. The number of school days impacts every one of our communities, as well as allowing teachers to be able to teach online courses, providing that waiver. Plug-in electric vehicles has been a highlight for a few years now, and important to many legislators. The transit incentives for public transit ridership. The court diversion, I added, if you have a courthouse nearby or a diversion program near where you live, you often hear from this group. Vermont National Guard Scholarship for higher education. And I put in the next one when Maria and I were going through the list, justice reinvestment, because that was a priority that passed the House on a very strong vote. The next two pieces are the childcare. And then if you go down, I don't know if we have room for one more, but the next back page will be all the CRF funding. And then there will be a separate sheet that has all the percentages of general fund, transportation, ed fund from fiscal year 20 to 21. And the total appropriations for this budget is just over it's 7.1 billion. And a lot of that has to do with the CRF funding, because the federal CRF funds is a 358.4% change. So that kind of skews those percentages, but it's because of the great deal of federal money coming into the state. Our year over growth in the general fund from fiscal year 20 to 21 is 3.6%. And transportation and TIB is under 1%. Education, the net education is 4.3. So the total state, all state funds, including education net, is a 3.4% increase. And then you have the 358% increase with CRF, and other federal funds is 2.7. So the total appropriations increase is 13.7%, but it was bumped way up because of the CRF funding. Any thoughts? Can I have a full screen, Teresa? Does this work for the committee? So it'll be that page, the CRF page, and then percentages. Maybe there was another highlight that I missed, but I was just going through sheets. Mary?
Nothing worse than editing with a committee, but you've given us a list of what we have done, or a highlight list, but it doesn't reflect some of the principles that underlaid our actions. I think we were very careful not to cut programs, and to protect services to the most vulnerable. And somehow I wonder if
reflected.
I know you're going to say those words very strongly on the floor, but sometimes people read more than they listen. And so I can imagine a couple of sentences at the front of the philosophy underlying how we approach this.
So maybe on that doesn't have to be the front sheet, the percentages could, and so we could, because there's another piece that's coming in, the total reserves. I'd like a section on our reserves, because our reserves are intact and what those total reserves are. And so on that sheet, we can highlight some of those bullets that there's no cuts in program, there's no reductions in programs and services. The budget is balanced, it reserves. We have full reserve, not use reserves to balance this budget. And the importance of holding capacity for your work in January. Does that sound like a good plan, and Maria's been working really hard on this and put the first draft forward for me to just do the poof to. So I have to give her all the credit, but I think Mary has some good points that we need to include. And that, you know, that we kept intact supports for vulnerable Vermonters. As a committee, did I capture that correctly?
That sounds like a nice way to make it work, Kitty.
Okay, Maria, we'll work on that together.
Sure, yep.
Okay. She's smiling behind there. Yeah, I'll put it together.
No,
and give it to
No,
Drew.
I'm taking copious notes.
Can I ask the committee a question? Because, you know, we're not in the halls. I don't have that much contact with people, which is probably happy for them. But, you know, has anybody been hearing anything about our budgets, like of like concerns or issues or surprises, like, oh, I can't believe you guys pulled this together? I don't know.
I think that there are some concerns from, you know, from caucus members, and it may be more moving forward about what's going to be needed to balance a budget, you know, maybe in 22, is your January issue. You know, will we need more revenues? Will we need to expand on some of the taxes that we have? Where, if reductions are made, where will those be? How do we mitigate those reductions? You know, I think that there's those looming questions about how do we start planning, and
The big unknowns.
but we've got to have some dust settle because we really don't know what our fiscal landscape looks like until life settles down a bit.
Yep.
Kitty, there was a letter sent to you and the speaker. Representative Zott alluded to a different path this morning when we were talking. And then anyways, I printed the document that the Workers' Caucus generated. I
Yep,
don't
I have
know
it
if that
right
was
in my
mailed
hand.
to you or not. But
Yes,
and I
and-
mentioned it only because I'm anticipating, I think the answer is this will really be a discussion for FY22, but they may try to invoke it on this budget, that
Yeah, and-
conversation.
And some of them are really outside the jurisdiction of the budget committee because part of it was to implement taxes on Vermont's highest income brackets. You know, that's going to be a conversation for all legislators to weigh in, but the Committee of Jurisdiction, Ways and Means will ultimately be looking at those issues. And then as a
Yeah,
result
sure.
of that is what we then look at. They also talked about, I have it right in front of me, create a tax and regulated market for recreational cannabis. That's a lot of policy. And then our committee will work off the direct impact from that. Create taxes or surcharges on the sale or transfers of homes valued over $1 million. Those are all going to be out of the tax policy committee. And then there's some transition of education funding to more progressive home-based, income-based systems. And a lot of this is Ways and Means. In other states, they have finance committees where appropriations and Ways and Means are one committee. But in Vermont, you know, as individual legislators, we have our personal opinions. You know, we push our own personal opinions, but we have you know, I don't have to say it, we have a tax committee. But one thing I did want to bring up and is that most other states do not handle grants the way Vermont does. These federal dollars that are coming in, many of the other states, the governor has sole authority how that, in our case, the $1.25 million goes out. The Vermont legislature has a tremendous amount of power over funding like that, where other states, the governor, and I believe New Hampshire is one of them, the governor decides solely, you know, with his advisors, but it's the governor's decision how those monies were spent. So Vermont is unique in all sorts of ways.
I don't have that letter right in front of me, but when I read it there was a lot of discussion about we need to set our budget so we're protecting the vulnerable and we're supporting families and we're supporting the environment and we're doing an awful lot of those things. Frankly, my response is, I think this budget does that. I think we're
Yeah,
supporting a
right.
lot of those issues that they talked about. And I kind of sat there and said, so what did we miss? What do you think we should be doing that's not here? That was just my gut reaction. And we don't need to respond to that as a committee either. But I think part of your overview, Kitty, can be that we tried definitely in this particular budget not to cut programs. We tried to keep things as stable as we could, in spite of somebody like me saying, I think we need to cut more. We didn't do that. And I think this budget is very responsible in that way. And I believe we have to stay within our income, but that's not their position.
I think that when we left in June, there was so much uncertainty and we didn't know what the taxes would be like coming into July, that it really appeared that we were going way upside down and reductions were probably,
Right.
and with the carry forward and the dollars coming in July, we were in much better shape than we anticipated. But what we anticipated in June is now what we are looking at for January. So,
Right.
back to Marty. Thank you. Mary?
Your point about not being nearly as far upside down as we expected is really important. And I think people on the floor will need to understand that. And I just have to, my gripe about the regulated market and let's do it. Let me remind us that the bill that we saw as it passed through our committee was going to cost more than it raised for what, 2+ years? It's not going to bring any income into the state for other programs, in my opinion. Great.
All right, so I need to get to work on whatever I'm going to say, because you guys keep giving me more instructions and I keep jotting them down, and I have to stay within my 5 minutes too, on my opening and closing. So I don't get 10, I get 5 total. Okay, I think we're good to call it a day, and we'll see, just look for Teresa's email to determine when we'll come in and hear any amendments on the bill that's on the floor. The stimulus equity bill. Okay.
Ready to go off live?
Wrap, yes, we can go off live.